The European Union issued new sanctions against Moscow, particularly targeting Russia's shadow fleet.
Brussels gives Poland the green light to temporarily suspend the right to asylum.
Syria's new administration has taken over the country's main international airport after security forces of the deposed Bashar al-Assad government and staff withdrew, grounding flights and stranding passengers. The airport has not been functional since. Now, security members of the rebel alliance in control of Syria have taken over Damascus International Airport, hoping to restore security, a sense of confidence, and the legitimacy needed to restart flights out of the capital. Elsewhere, life slowly began returning to normalcy in Damascus, with some shops reopening and people strolling through markets. Banks and government institutions had also reopened. In public squares, some people were still celebrating. Meanwhile, thousands of displaced Syrians are returning home from neighbouring countries, as Syria's head of transitional cabinet Mohammed al-Bashir called on those abroad to return.
Now is the time for these people to enjoy stability and calm, said Syria's interim Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir in an interview, demonstrating the intentions of the new leadership. However, the situation remains extremely fluid as there are multiple actors that could play a key role in Syria's future.
Αυτό δείχνει ότι τουλάχιστον σε πρώτη φάση δεν θα δούμε μια παρατεταμένη αστάθεια, αλλά μια προσπάθεια να λειτουργήσει κατά κάποιο τρόπο στη Συρία ως ένα κράτος για να μπει το πλαίσιο. Από την άλλη πλευρά, ο ίδιος μιλά για μια αρκετά μακρομηνιαία, να το πω έτσι, περίοδο μετάβασης μέχρι να δούμε εκλογές στη Συρία. Άρα το αν τελικά θα μετατρέψει, όπως δείχνει, την Tahrir al-Sham σε ένα περισσότερο πολιτικό σκέλος, δηλαδή και ο ίδιος να μετατραπεί από συντονιστή στρατιωτικών επιχειρήσεων σε πολιτικό πρόσωπο, και τι θα σημάνει αυτό, δηλαδή αν θα αναζητήσει συμμάχους, ποιοι θα στελεχώσουν αυτή την οργάνωση εφόσον γίνει πολιτική και ποιοι άλλοι θα μπουν σε αυτή την ιστορία. Θα δούμε ένα μοντέλο τύπου Αφγανιστάν, ποιος θα είναι ο ρόλος των δυτικών δυνάμεων και κυρίως αυτών που έχουν αυτή τη στιγμή μεγάλη επίδραση, όπως είναι η Τουρκία. Είναι πολλά τα ζητούμενα, αλλά αυτή τη στιγμή όλα γυρίζουν γύρω από το τζολάνι.
Israel, which has been attacking targets in Syria for months, stated its intention to create a, quote, sterile defensive zone inside Syria's southern border.
Το μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον τόσο για το Ισραήλ όσο και τις ΗΠΑ είναι να μην ξαναγίνει η Συρία ό,τι έγινε το 2011. Η στρατηγική ευκαιρία για την ISIS ή κάποια άλλη οργάνωση σαν την ISIS να πάρει εδαφική υπόσταση και να αναπτύξει μια νέα τρομοκρατική διαδικασία.
For many of the 14 million Syrians forced to flee their homes since the civil war began, the question is whether they can now return.
The European Union issued new sanctions against Russia, particularly targeting the tankers Russia uses to circumvent Western restrictions on oil trade. Oil is a major source of income that is crucial to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. In 2022, the European Union introduced an oil price cap which prohibited Western companies from providing services to Russian tankers that went beyond this limit. As a way around this, Moscow began using the shadow fleet, which are old uninsured tankers. The poorly kept tankers have obscure ownership and insurance structures that escape the controls of G7 partners. Brussels is worried the poor condition of the ships could spill oil and cause an environmental catastrophe. The shadow fleet has also been accused of deceptive practices, including transmitting falsified data, turning off their transporters to become invisible to satellite systems, and conducting multiple ship-to-ship transfers to conceal the origin of the oil barrels.
Brussels has given Poland the green light to suspend the right to asylum for migrants entering the country across the border with Belarus, and points to the weaponization of migrants by Russia as a risk to the EU. European Commission Vice President Henneveer Kunen believes that on the bloc's eastern border the security threat has already moved to the next level, but says cases must be clearly defined.
They may limit also the exercise of the rights to asylum, but it has to happen in very strict conditions and in legal limits. So it means that they have to be truly exceptional, temporary, proportionate, and for clearly defined cases.
The European Commission believes that Belarus and Russia promote the use of violence via migrants. However, human rights organizations reiterated the pushbacks are illegal. Lydia Gall of Human Rights Watch said the pushbacks fly in the face of Poland's duties under national and EU law. In 2024, the arrival of migrants across the EU border with Belarus increased by 66% compared to the previous year. The vast majority of them were on Russian visas.
Protests continued across Georgia on Wednesday as more groups joined thousands on the streets of the capital, Tbilisi, in daily demonstrations against the ruling party. The Georgian Dream Party, which officials say won the October elections, provoked widespread anger in the country when it suspended EU accession talks until 2028.
As the protests continue in Georgia, the groups from various sectors organize daily demonstrations at different locations. On day 14, the students, professors and teachers have gathered in front of the Ministry of Education. Meanwhile, the civil servants and scientists have also held their own demonstrations at different locations, calling for the new election and the resumption of the accession negotiations with the European Union. After their demonstrations, they marched to the Parliament building of Georgia, where they joined the larger protests there. The protest shows no sign of slowing down as Georgians remain steadfast in their demand of change and a return to the European integration path.
The Georgian government has justified a police crackdown on pro-European protesters with the action of violent groups among the demonstrators. The groups were deliberately targeting the police force, Georgia's new minister Maka Bachorashvili said. Speaking to Euronews in an exclusive interview, she questioned the character of the protests.
Everybody has right to protest, but right to peaceful protest. And unfortunately, I have to say that we cannot really call this protest necessarily peaceful because the violent groups that were acting with the fireworks and their target was police forces, and we have around 200 policemen injured, and some of them really received very serious injuries. It is very hard to say that it is peaceful protest. But on the other hand, if there is anything, when we see that police is exceeding its limits of reaction, of course, there should be reaction from relevant bodies, and there is very clear statement from Prime Minister that this kind of actions should be investigated.
The protests are directed against a recent decision by Tbilisi to put EU accession talks on hold. The process was already in limbo after the ruling Georgian Dream Party passed a controversial foreign influence law that EU critics compared to a similar legislation in Russia. Georgia's foreign minister rejected the notion that her government was tilting towards Moscow.
Georgian Dream is in power for 12 years now, and in this period, nobody can find anything that this government has done in favor of Russia. But today it is very popular to divide the world into white and black, and if somebody wants to make easy negative impression about somebody, it is easier to claim that somebody is pro-Russian or pro-Putin. And unfortunately, that is the case.
The full interview with Maka Bachorashvili will be available this Friday on our program, The Europe Conversation.
Three-quarters of MEPs lead a double life, according to an analysis published by the NGO Transparency International EU. 74% of MEPs have a side job, some of which provide additional income for elected representatives.
Alors au total, pour les activités qui sont rémunératrices, nous avons trouvé une estimation de 6,3 millions d'euros, c'est un chiffre assez conséquent, et à savoir que nous avons trouvé jusqu'à 14 députés qui potentiellement gagnent plus de leurs activités annexes que leur salaire en tant qu'eurodéputés.
Members of Parliament on the right and centre are more likely to have paid secondary jobs than their counterparts on the left. German, Romanian and French MEPs declare the highest incomes. Of the 1,700 activities listed, most involves membership of company or NGO boards. Sometimes MEPs have activities linked to consultancy firms or law firms. For Transparency International, this is a conflict of interest.
Nous devons bannir toutes les activités qui pourraient avoir une implication ou une incidence sur les politiques publiques européennes ou qui pourraient être affectées par les politiques publiques européennes. Parce que c'est seulement comme ça que l'on peut vraiment prévenir les conflits d'intérêts. Il faut aussi que les déclarations soient proactivement vérifiées par le Parlement européen ou une meilleure façon par une entité externe, donc une vérification indépendante de l'administration.
These side activities are not illegal, and the MEPs stress that they are useful for maintaining links with reality outside the chamber. Finally, they assure that there is no conflict with their daily duties as MEPs.